In today's video, I'm going to talk about portrait lens for full-frame camera. So what is the ideal portrait focal length, the max aperture, and also other factors like weight, size, autofocus, speed. So first, let's talk about focal length. Again, this is for a hobbyist. So what is the best focal length for a portraiture? I think 85, around 85 should be the best. Here are my reasons. First, what is the standard 50mm lens on a full-frame camera? This is a lens that does not produce any compression or stretching of space. For example, if you use a wide-angle lens, there are two objects. One is closer to you, the other is farther away from you. And with a wide-angle lens, the object closer to you will appear much larger than the object that's farther away from you. And because your brain will make the adjustment, it will think that the two objects are very far away, when in fact they are not that far away apart. The telephoto lens, just like telescope, it works exactly opposite. The two objects are farther away, but with a telephoto lens, they appear right next to each other, just slightly behind one object. It compresses the space. So the 50mm lens, the huge advantage is that it's truthful. It shows the world as your eyes see it. It does not compress the space like a telephoto lens. It does not stretch the space like a wide-angle lens. But it's also its weakness because it's boring. It's just what your eyes see. It doesn't do anything special. I personally very much like 50mm lens because it's very truthful. But at the same time, I wouldn't recommend it for portraiture because 50mm lens is a little bit too short. If you want to fully utilize your sensor size, the 36mm times 24mm full frame sensor size, if you need a longer lens, if you are taking a portrait of just a headshot, if you have 50mm lens, you want to use all your pixels, you will have to step forward and you will get too close to the subject. When you're too close to the subject, see the nose sticks out, and relatively to the rest of the face, the nose will be too close to the sensor of the camera than the rest of the face. Then the nose becomes bigger than it really is. And because you're too close to the subject, your perspective changes and your subject's eye will move to the sides. So whatever focal length you use, I would recommend you keep at least 10 feet from your subject, 8 to 10 feet. Don't get too close, otherwise your perspective changes and your subject will look weird. Okay, that's why we need a telephoto lens, because it allows you to use your full sensor size without having to get too close to the subject. So I'm not saying that the wide-angle lens is not good for portraiture. You can produce some really interesting effect with a wide-angle lens, like 35mm for portraiture. If your model is beautiful, the subject is beautiful, with the long legs, beautiful shoes and socks, you can of course make her sit on some stairs and take a photo, and her legs appears much longer than it really is, and the foot and the shoe are exaggerated. So that's the wide-angle lens. The wide-angle lens with a portraiture creates some really interesting effect. Also environmental portraiture, because the angle of the view is wider, you can bring some background, interesting background into the photo. Like if your model or subject is in a beautiful garden, there are a lot of beautiful flowers and stuff, you do not want to blur them out, you can use a wider angle. Yeah. So most of the time, however, the wide angle will not be good for portraiture because it exaggerates the features that you do not want to exaggerate, like the big belly. It sticks out, and with a wide angle lens, it appears even larger than it really is. The nose. And also, another example, last year we went to Vermont with my wife and daughter, and my wife is 5'8", and she had to bend to take a photo with my daughter, and she put her face next to my daughter's face. Guess what? Because I used a 35mm lens, my wife's head appears so big relative to her body because she was bending. Her face is much closer to the sensor than the rest of her body, so it appears she had a huge head, which is not very flattering. So this is the focal length for portraiture. You may pull off some special shots by exaggerating certain features like the beautiful feet and stuff with a wide angle lens, but for most of the time you will screw up with a wide angle lens for portraiture because you exaggerate the wrong features. And I personally would recommend 85mm for portraiture, or a zoom lens like 70 to 200 f2.8, so you have even more flexibility, because it's equally useful indoors and outdoors. The 85mm, if the room is not big enough, with the 200mm you're going to back into a wall. You have no space to back into. 85 is not too long, not too short. Same outside of the door. If you have 85 millimeter, even if in some busy area like New York City, if you use 200 millimeter, it's guaranteed that there will be people, cars, etc. between you and your model. If you use 85, you're not too far away from the subject. You can find some little window where you can snap a shot without other people interfering, right? So if you're in the open, in the, say, national park, state park, whatever, there are no other people, what kind of focal length do you want to use? It's up to you. I personally prefer longer lens, 130 millimeter or longer, because this will let me stay far away from the subject. I can snap candid shots without them noticing, and I think that's a huge advantage, because for non-professional models, for average person, their expression would become very unnatural when they know there are people taking photos of them. So longer photo length allows me to take candid shots very easily. So that's my talk about the focal length. Let's now talk about the max aperture. So which one is best? Of course, the larger the better, because you can create blurry background, which is very artistic, and that's pretty much it. But then again, you need to be mindful of the weight and size. The larger aperture lens can weigh a lot more than a regular smaller aperture lens. And also autofocus speed is also important, because sometimes if you take the candid shots, you want to capture the moment, it's not a posed portrait, then the autofocus speed is very important, because you do not want to miss the moment. So for average hobbyist, what do I recommend? 85mm 1.8. It's not too heavy, it's very sharp, it's 1.8 aperture is pretty good, and 85 focal length can take care of your needs both indoors and outdoors. And if you don't mind the weight, 70-100 f2.8, that works too. And if, of course, you have the extra budget, 85 1.4 works as well. Okay, that's my video. Thank you.